Live today. All right, so today what we're doing is we're talking about filament. It's all about filament today, so stick around because that's what we're getting into. And we have a lot of filament to cover. And why does my printer not, oh man, I am having a day. So let's start with PLA, all right? For those of you that don't know and haven't been here before, my name is Richard, and I am your host every Wednesday on the show. And what we do here is we talk about 3D printing. We explore the world of 3D printing through interviews, how-tos, and knowledge and education, just like we're going to talk about today. And today we are talking about filament, all kinds of filament. And the filament that we're going to be talking about, we have a whole bunch of it that we want to get to today. And you can see there's a whole pile of it on my desk. And I want to take you through the different filaments that Spool 3D has available to you. And I want to take you through a bunch of the other types of filaments that are out there. And while we're on the topic, let's not forget, if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel. We hit 100 subscribers last night, and I can't be more happy about that. We're going to do a live draw on Friday for the Catwoman model. And if you haven't clicked the bell for the notifications, make sure you click the bell and subscribe so you get notified every time we do a brand new episode. So let's get right into it. Audio's good. Thank you very much, Derek. Okay, let's start talking about filament. And the first filament I want to get into today is PLA. And this is PLA right here. This is the bronze PLA. I'm going to talk about the difference between the color bronze and actual bronze PLA in just a couple of minutes. But first and foremost, I want to talk about PLA. PLA is probably the most common printer filament that you can use. Anytime you buy a new printer, you usually get a sample or some sort of roll with your printer. A lot of printer manufacturers today have filament included with their printer so you can test it out. PLA is polylactic acid, and it's made from cornstarch, so it's biodegradable. It prints at a low temperature. You don't need a heated bed for it, although I use a heated bed just to help with adhesion. And it's a good all-around plastic to get started with when you're using your 3D printer for the first time. One of the downsides to this is it needs to be stored when you're not using it. If you live in a humid climate or where there's a lot of moisture in the air, you definitely want to make sure that you get yourself some way to store this that will absorb the moisture. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that by bringing this guy up. Now, this is just a normal freezer bag that you can get anywhere. And if you are using a lot of PLA, get yourself a box of freezer bags. Every one of the PLA rolls that you buy, or every roll of material that you buy, should come with a desiccant pack inside the center of the roll. 9 times out of 10, you're going to find a desiccant pack with it because manufacturer does not want you to, doesn't want the material to be exposed to moisture before it gets to you. So make sure that if you're not using your PLA, put it into a Ziploc bag, take the air out, and throw that desiccant pack in there. I've got a couple of desiccant packs in this one already. I also, for demonstration purposes, put in, and let me show you this thing. This is a moisture meter. This comes from Desiccare Incorporated, desiccare.com. You can also get these through Spool 3D. It tells you the level of moisture in your room. And there's a warning on here. If this turns pink, get rid of your desiccant because that means your desiccant is not doing the job that you wanted it to do. So make sure you just pop your desiccant in there, you Ziploc that bag, try and take as much air out of that bag as possible. And then you can store that in a cupboard, into a Rubbermaid tub, or however you want to store it after you get it into a bag. This is the most economical way to do it. And those, like I said, those desiccant packs come in with your filament, so make sure that you use them. Next, let's move on to talking about the next most popular filament, and that is ABS. Now, everybody knows that ABS is a popular material, and every 3D printer out there can print ABS. ABS is not as susceptible to moisture as PLA is, so you don't really necessarily have to put them into a Ziploc bag, but I would definitely put them into a Ziploc bag. Some of the drawbacks to printing with this stuff is that it has an odor to it. So you want to make sure that you're not printing in a room that you're sitting in all the time, or that you have family members or pets, because it does have a burning plastic smell odor. So don't print this stuff in a room where you've got a lot of people. Secondly, it is very sensitive to temperature change. So if you're going to print with ABS, you want to make sure that you have some sort of enclosure around your printer. So that'll keep the warm air in and will allow this to cool gradually. When the print is done, when you're using ABS, you want to make sure that it does cool gradually, because if it's in the open air, what's going to happen is you'll get curling or lifting off the build plate where it's starting to shrink. You'll also get layer separation. So by having it in an enclosed environment and letting it cool in that enclosed environment, don't take your print off the bed when it's done, just let it cool naturally. Everything should cool down. And then you can take your print off the print bed. I bought a D6 specifically, a Wanhao Duplicator 6, specifically just to print ABS. That may sound kind of crazy to some people, because, you know, why would I go and spend that much money on a printer when I can build an enclosure? The reason I did that is because some of my printers have all of the electronics built onto the frame. And I've experienced this once already, that if those get too hot by being in an enclosure, then they will blow on you, and then you'll be without a printer. So I bought a printer specifically for doing ABS. But if you have a machine that you've built yourself, excuse me, I'm still fighting a cold from last week. If you've got a printer, as I was saying, that has the electronics built onto it or is in a separate box, you can take that and put it on the outside of your enclosure. You can take the electronics and the power supply off and mount them to the back of your enclosure. Just want to run your wires a little bit longer. So it is possible to print with any printer, printing ABS. You have to have a heated bed, and the temperature-wise, this stuff is going to be anywhere from around 200 to 250, depending on the manufacturer. So I've seen some manufacturers as low as 190. Our red here at Spool 3D is 190 to 230. So there is definitely an advantage to that. Disadvantages, as I was saying, it can cause an odor. If it cools too fast, you can have a ruined print. So be very, very aware of printing with that. You can print with a standard nozzle. You can print ABS with a standard nozzle setup, but you may want to move to an all metal, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. So let's move on to our next filament, and that is PVA. Now, PVA is used as a build structure. So you'll use it to build your support material. If you've got a dual head extruder, it's great for that setup, because you can do all of your supports out of PVA, and you can do your model out of PETG, ABS, PLA, whatever you want to do it out of. And to get rid of those supports, you just put it in water and let them dissolve. PVA is not a good material to use for building your models. It is only used for support structure and things like that. So if you're doing a complicated tube that needs support structure in the middle, traditionally we would take all the supports out of that and hope for the best. But with PVA and a dual extruder, you can definitely get that build material inside, throw it into some water, it'll dissolve out, and you're good to go. It prints at about 180 to 230, so be aware of the temperature difference to the other materials that you're using. It's non-toxic and it's also biodegradable. It's difficult to source on the con side, and it's never easy to use as artifacts and it attracts water. So you want to make sure that you get it into a plastic bag when you're not using it, okay? So moving right along to PETG. Now PETG is probably one of my favorite materials to use because I don't need a chamber or some sort of cover over my printer. I do, however, have to work with the limitations of PETG. PETG, or PETG as it's commonly referred to, is the same material that your water bottles are made out of. There's a lot of food safe products that are made from PETG plastic. The drawback to it is not all PETG plastics that you buy for thermoprinting or for your printer can be used with food. So be aware of that. Make sure if you're going to buy PETG to make stuff to store food in or to use around food, that it is safe for food use, okay? We've got some black PETG over here. The black PETG is, again, this is not food safe. So I wouldn't do something like a drink bottle out of this for myself. I would make sure that I'm using either a clear or a natural that has no fillers in it. Fillers are how they get the color in all of these different thermoplastics that we're talking about today. The plus side, again, like I said, you don't need to have yourself a enclosure to print with it. The downside to it is that it's very sticky. So you're going to get stringing between parts if you've got multiple parts on top of your build plate. You do need a heated build plate to work with this stuff. I recommend that because of the temperatures on some PETGs that you go with an all metal hot end, specifically the throat, which you guys can see here. Let me see if I can go over this camera here. Hang on a second. Let me see if I can move over this camera. Let's see if I can get in there. So the throat right there, you want to make sure that the throat is an all metal throat that does not have a PTFE liner in it because of the temperatures that you will be printing PETG at. You're going to be printing them at 240, 245, 250, and if you've got a liner inside there, it will break down at that it'll start to break down at that 240 temperature and start melting by the time you get up to 245, 250. So make sure that you have an all metal throat inside there. All right, so PETG, just to recap, great material. It's got strength of PLA, has the strength, pardon me, of ABS, has no smell to it or very little odor. It's easy to print with, and it's strong. So that's a good alternative to ABS. One of the drawbacks I find to PETG is that it can absorb water from the air. So again, you want to make sure that you put it into a plastic bag. It does have a little bit of flexibility to it, and it's got some shock resistance. I'm not going to say it's shock proof because it's not. It does have some shock resistance though. And let's go on to hips. I don't have any hips in front of me, but it's a high impact polystyrene. Okay, so it's better than ABS, better than PETG. It's less likely to warp when you're printing with it. The drawback is you need higher temperatures again to print with it, 210 to 250 Celsius. You want to make sure that you've got an all metal hot end for that. Again, no liner in that throat. And while you're at it, you might as well change your nozzle to an all-metal nozzle if you're going to print with hips. Has curling and adhesion issues, so be aware of that. Put some glue or some hairspray down on your heat bed, and then it should stick fine. Nylon is the next one I want to get into. Nylon is a great material to print with. However, it is very, very sensitive to moisture. So if you are in a high humid climate, you're likely to get moisture. It'll absorb moisture from the air into the filament. Once it does that, it makes it very difficult to print with, okay? And if that should happen, you can take it, throw it into your oven. There's a couple of videos on how to dry out nylon in your oven. For those friends of mine that are on the East Coast, you guys have a lot of humidity out there because you're on the ocean, for lack of a better word. And you can definitely go ahead and put it in your oven and dry it out, okay? So, and then once you've got it dry, get it into a plastic bag right away. Don't leave it on your printer. If you're not printing with nylon, put it into a plastic bag, store it properly. It has high strength durability and flexibility. It's less brittle than PLA or ABS. It's 100% thermoplastic. It can be remelted again. It's got a very high melting temperature, around 240. Hot ends containing materials like PEK and PTFE, which are those liners that I talked about. You're going to have to upgrade to an all-metal throat. And when heated, they'll break down and emit some toxic fumes. So be aware that when you're printing with nylon, that it does emit fumes. Okay, so you don't want to have your printer in a family area. Have it in an office or a garage or wherever, but make sure that, because of the fumes, that it's out of the area of children. But it's a great plastic to print with. I'm getting ready to print with some pretty soon. So again, store it properly, and you should have all the success in the world with nylon if you do the right stuff. So it's a synthetic polymer, by the way, and it can be dyed. I should mention that. There's a great video, MatterHackers did a great video on how to dye nylon. And you don't want to dye the whole roll. You just basically want to print your part and dye your part. If you can't get your filament in the color that you want, that's the way that I would do it. So I'm going to just have a quick look and see Micro Swisser all metal hot end. The German printing nerd, yes, all metal hot end for printing nylon, definitely. All right, let's move along to one of my other banes of my existence, and that's wood. Looks like wood, smells like wood. Does it taste like wood? No, it tastes like plastic. Don't stick plastic in your mouth. Just a caveat about wood. I like it, but it is very brittle. It'll break really easily. So it's very brittle. They're heckling me outside. We have a window to the studio, so they're heckling me. So it can break very easily. It's fairly brittle, but it does contain actual wood fiber. So when you've printed with this stuff, you can sand it like wood. You can stain it. It'll accept stains and paints. So it's versatile in that regard. I wouldn't use it to put any kind of flower pot. Although, okay, let me asterisk that a little bit. There was a fella, Uncle Jesse actually. If you haven't seen Uncle Jesse's stuff, go check him out on YouTube. He's another great resource for 3D printing. He made a Groot flower pot, and first thing I think of is that it'll never hold water. But what he did was took some of that black sealant spray that you can buy, and he sealed the inside of the cup of the pot, and he planted a flower in it. And it's still holding up today from what I understand. Printing with wood, it's 200 to 250 roughly is your printing temperatures. You want to make sure that you have, again, get that all metal throat. You don't necessarily need to have a hardened steel or a stainless steel nozzle, but it does help. I would print wood with a 0.5 millimeter nozzle or a 500 micron nozzle as opposed to your standard 0.4 millimeter or 400 micron nozzle. As I said, it contains real wood fibers. It produces different shades depending on the temperature of the hot end. So it can darken, it can lighten. So it gives you more of a wood look. You can decorate and post-process it, like cut it, grind it, paint it, whatever. So it's pretty good that way. It's softer and weaker compared to PLA. It doesn't have any flexibility and tensile strength. Don't make parts with it. And it breaks fairly easily, as you saw me do there. Again, it can absorb moisture, so when you're not using wood filament, make sure that you put it into a plastic bag with a desiccant pack, okay? Metal filament. I haven't got any metal here, but this is PLA bronze, and I talked about that a little bit earlier. This is the color bronze. This has no metal content in it. It's just colored bronze. This PLA you cannot shine up like you can with the metals. Metal comes in iron, it comes in copper, brass, tungsten. So there's many different types of metals that it comes in. The biggest caveat to it is you need a fairly decent temperature, 195 to 230, 240. It's durable, it's not soluble at all, it has very little shrinkage. The downside, you need to make sure that you have an all metal hot end, including that tip. That nozzle should be either hardened steel or it should be a stainless steel. The reason that you don't want to use brass with metal is because it is going to open up the aperture on that nozzle very, very quickly because it's metal and it's like taking a file to your brass tip. It's just going to open it up and it'll ruin it really, really, really fast. Conductive PLA. One of our community members over on the Facebook page, I'll link to that a little later in the show notes below. He actually printed some conductive PLA, and he took some benchies and ran some wires to them and had a circuit all set up. So every time he touched one of these benchies, the lights came on, and it's actually a pretty cool little video. Go check it out. I believe it's Chris Garrett over in our community on Facebook, and that's the first layer on Facebook, so go check that out. If you're not a member there, go and become a member. So conductive filaments, they need a higher temperature, 215 to 240. It allows for low voltage electronic circuits. It's not soluble and doesn't require a heated bed, although I print everything with a heated bed just to be on the safe side. For better results, they recommend that you have a heated bed. It's not durable and it is not flexible, okay? Bending the material repeatedly will break it. It shrinks during cooling. It's not safe for food, obviously. And conductive PLA 3D filament is fairly expensive. So it's on the higher end. Carbon fiber is the next one I want to talk about. There's two types of carbon fiber filament out there. There's a powder, and then there is one that actually has the fibers of the carbon built right into it, or melted into it. Carbon fiber is a great, strong filament to use. The downside, again, you need an all metal hot end. And the German printing nerd says nylon cannot be printed with normal nozzle. You're absolutely right, it cannot. You need to have an all metal nozzle for that. Wood's great for figures like Baby Groot. You're absolutely right. So moving right along, let's let's get back to that hot end, and let's talk a little bit more about carbon fiber. So carbon fiber does need a higher temperature to print at. Again, there's two different types. There's the powder version, which is carbon fiber powder infused into the material when they make the PLA string. The other is the fiber version, and that's usually carbon fiber plus. You find it goes by various names online. And if you are not using an all metal hot end, again, stainless steel tip or hardened steel tip and an all metal throat, no liners in that throat, then by all means, go ahead and start printing with it. You're going to notice that it has a higher temperature that it needs to print at. So you're 200 to 235. It prints really well, very durable and soluble, doesn't require a heated bed, very little shrinkage and warping during cooling. So that's an advantage of carbon fiber. Materials made from abrasive materials. Again, going back to that nozzle, you want to make sure that you've got a stainless steel or hardened nozzle, okay? When finely ground increases the wear and tear on printer nozzles, and we talked about that, and the printer nozzles should be made of a coated or hardened steel. So flexibles, let's move right along to flexibles. Now I haven't got any flexible materials in front of me. Flexibles, I'm going to link to a video that we talked about when we were setting up extruders. You really need to have a specialized setup. Now you can print Bowden and you can print direct with flexibles. It's all a matter of how that extruder is set up. The more constrained the path is, the easier it's going to be for your flexible filament to get through your hot end. If you've got a standard style setup, you are going to have a real problem, because what will happen, and I talked about this when we were talking about the Flexion extruder system, is that if you don't have that constrained path, that flexible material is going to get caught. It's going to be dragged in around the gear, and then it just becomes a mess. But the plus side is if you have the right system, like the Flexion system, then you can print with flexible materials all day long. And some of the advantages to printing with flexible materials is their elasticity, their excellent abrasion resistance, consistent diameter, easily sticks to any platform, so it's also got good bond adhesion between the layers, low shrinkage during cooling, and doesn't require a heated bed. Again, let's go back to that heated bed. 99% of printers, or 98% of printers these days, have a heated bed. If you're buying anything that has that 200 by 200 by 200 millimeter diameter or build volume, printing with this material can be very difficult. Again, if you don't have the right extruder setup, it requires fine tuning of your nozzle, so be aware of that. And it has a tendency to squeeze out in all directions coming out of your nozzle when it's hot. So be aware of that as well. Let me have a quick look at your comments. For metal, is a ruby nozzle best? That's a tough one. I haven't used the ruby nozzle. German Printing Nerd's asking that question. I haven't used the ruby nozzle yet. It's $100 for a ruby nozzle. Do I think I need to spend $100 on a nozzle? No. $30 on a hardened steel nozzle is just fine for me. So I hope that answers your question. I don't think you're going to get any more or less wear out of a ruby tip nozzle, and why spend the extra $70? Glow in the dark filament, that's our next one. I haven't got any here, but glow in the dark filament is, its printing temperature is 215, 250, somewhere in there. Excuse me. It does not, or it's durable and it's not soluble and has low shrinkage during cooling. That's an advantage of it. Again, because it has material infused into the plastic filament, what will happen is if you don't have a hardened nozzle, it's going to bore a bigger hole. Stainless steel or hardened nozzle, again, if you're printing with glow-in-the-dark filaments, I've been asked how long does it glow? I couldn't tell you. It all depends how much you charge it up, what you've printed, I would imagine, as part of that. It's a similar standard to PLA in terms of its strength and durability, and it doesn't require a heated bed either. It's not food safe, so be aware of that. You do need, though, to have a stainless steel or a hard nozzle to print with it. I would go to an all metal. Excuse me. An all metal throat. I'm fighting a cold. I apologize. So if you want to print with glow in the darks, they're great. I sent some out to my cousin recently. And you should be using that pretty soon. So what is the best filament to start with? If you're an absolute beginner to 3D printing, I can't recommend enough, go and use as much PLA as you have to. Learn your printer, learn what your printer is capable of, experiment with the different layer heights and widths, and learn everything that you can learn to become proficient with your printer and printing as you can by using PLA. The reason is it's easy to print with, it's inexpensive, it's about, for a 1 kg roll, around 29, 30 bucks depending on where you buy it from. Has no smell, you don't need a heated chamber or some sort of enclosure around your printer to print with it. So I say to you, start with PLA. If you are into that intermediate and you want to start venturing out and printing with ABS, PETGs, I've printed with both of them. I like both of them. Again, with ABS, you need to have that enclosure around your printer. Be aware that it does get warm in there and that all of those fumes are going to stay inside, trapped inside, and eventually they will dissipate. So with ABS, again, make sure you have that enclosure and let your ABS completely cool before taking it off the build plate and exposing it to the other elements in your home, okay? So intermediate, ABS, PETG, woods, the wood filament. When you start getting into the more advanced stuff and you've upgraded your printer a little bit, especially the nozzle, you've gone to an all metal throat and you've gone to an all metal tip. Now, that being said, we all know that brass is an all metal, but brass is a very soft material, so you want a stainless steel or a hard nozzle to start getting into printing with some of the metal filaments, which are gorgeous, by the way. The metal filaments, you can actually polish them up. I should have mentioned that earlier. You can polish up the metal filaments and they look outstanding. Just a little bit of care and they look absolutely beautiful. If you want to make, I just want to go back and talk to Derek here. He says, is it wise to make a box for the Anycubic i3 Mega so it retains some heat and keeps cats out? Or should I be worried about overheating? I wouldn't be worried about overheating. One of the things that you can do, Derek, when using ABS and some of the filaments that you want to keep enclosed and keep the cat out, you guys obviously have an IKEA around where you are. Go to IKEA and buy a lac or end table. They're about $9. Really simple. You buy one of those, print yourself off some leg extensions. Excuse me. Print yourself off some leg extensions, and you can either put cardboard around it or you can put some plexiglass around it. It's all up to you. You know, how fancy do you want to make your cover? You can do a cabinet very much like the one I've got behind me, where you can put it in the cabinet. Open the door if you're going to be printing with other materials, you know, like PLA or something along that line. So yeah, it's real simple to make an enclosure. Take the enclosure off or open the door so you can get some decent air circulation in there when you're not printing with filaments like ABS, okay? I hope that answered your question. Just got an IKEA last month. There you go to IKEA, they're $10. Called LACK, L-A-C-K. So with that being said, I hope I covered enough about the filaments that get you started in printing, 3D printing. I want to tell you what's coming up on Monday. We are going to be talking about 3D Christmas presents, or an Xmas buying guide, Christmas buying guide. We're going to go into that, talk about a little bit about some printers that you might want to consider, some other filaments, and a bunch of other accessories that you might want to talk about. Then we're going to talk about what nozzle is right on our live stream on Monday. So that, again, is going to go back to what we were talking about here today. We're going to get a little bit deeper into those nozzles. We are going to be tackling slicing software next Wednesday. So we're going to be talking about paid and free options for you. We're going to talk about how to change your nozzle as well on another live stream. I might combine that with what nozzle is right for you. And on December 8th, it's going to be a live Q&A. So get your questions ready about 3D printing. I want to thank our community. We've reached 100 subscribers as of last night. Thank you again, everybody, for coming on board and being part of our community. I'm taking all of the names from YouTube and all of the names from our Facebook group. I'm combining them together, and I'm going to do a live stream on Friday when we talk about the Christmas buying guide, and I'm going to draw a name live on Friday. So make sure that you guys are around for that. What else? I want to thank Spool 3D. Print it right. Print it with Spool 3D. They have everything that you need, from printers, filaments, and all the accessories that you could ever need for your printer, all in one house. Go to spool3d.ca and get your printing supplies here in Canada. If your orders are over $140, there's free shipping anywhere in Canada. So if you're in Canada, it's a great way to do it. What else do I want to quickly say to you guys, other than come back and join me here on Friday for a live stream. Today's was supposed to be just a recorded show. For whatever reason, I accidentally hit the stream, and then you guys got to see me talking, but no sound. So I apologize for that. So I just decided, okay, why not? You guys are all still here anyway. Let's do a live stream. And Derek says, thank you for redoing the stream. You are very welcome. I hope you guys got a lot of information out of today. And I hope that if you have any more questions, be sure to leave them in the comments down below. And I will make sure that I try and answer them the best that I can. If you want to get yourself one of these stickers for the first layer, drop me a self-addressed stamped envelope in the mail and I will send one out to you. We're running low on them. Mark Brennan is asking, can you change layer height? There are a ton of more settings when you get into the custom side. I'm not quite sure what you're meaning there. You can change layer heights with your software, but we'll cover that when we talk about slicing software on December 6th. So until Friday, you guys have the great rest of the week. I'll see you on Friday, and we're going to draw the winner for that Catwoman model that I'm printing right now. And we're going to draw the winner for that on Friday live right here at 1:30 Mountain Standard Time. So until then, you guys have yourself a great time, and I'll talk to you on Friday. Bye now.